everyone, and welcome back to Clocking In with PilieroMazza, Labor and Employment News for Government Contractors. I'm Nicole Atala, and I'm here with
Sarah Nash. Hi, everyone.
Again, we're partners in the Labor and Employment Group here at PilieroMazza. We're excited to be back with you again today. Hopefully you're not sick of hearing us yet, but today we're going to talk about where are these regulations already, right? And just a few kind of odds and ends that have been hanging out there for a long time. We frequently get questions about, is this applicable yet? Does this apply to a contract? What should I do about this? You know, because a lot of these regulations and initiatives that have been issued either through executive order or by agencies have kind of been hanging out there for a long time, and we're in this holding pattern. So we're going to kind of talk about just a few of these. Obviously, we're not going to cover them all, but we are going to start with, I don't know, Sarah, what do you think? What do you want to start with?
Non-displacement.
So as many of you know, the Biden administration kind of revived the non-displacement for qualified workers under the Service Contract Act. And so we've had proposed rules. We were supposed to have final rules last July, I think. It's been a long time. But the basic premise of this thing is basically, it's not crazy far away from what it was under the Obama administration, but there are some anticipated differences based on what we saw in both the executive order and the proposed rules. The idea being that if you are working on an SCA contract and you are a non-exempt service employee, the next contractor, assuming the current contractor isn't awarded the contract, has to offer you a right of first refusal to work on the follow-on contract. And there's a certain number of business days that you have to get before they can extend an offer to someone else. They can't just say, well, I don't, the contracting officer told me not to hire you. They have to have just cause not to hire you, which is really hard to do. And that's different than the prior executive order, which just said that you had to have written credible evidence of poor performance. And there are a number of other quirks that we're kind of waiting to see how the Department of Labor will land on some of these issues. But Sarah, is there anything else you want to? We're hoping we get this thing by summertime. And I think hoping is maybe a strong word, because every time clients ask me about it, I'm saying, hold up, it's not applicable to anything yet. It might not enter to your benefit to get it. So,
yeah, the only thing I'll add is some folks might be saying, what's the big deal? I'm already going to hire the incumbent workforce. It's cheaper. They know what to do. The government most often appreciates the work that they're doing. What's the big deal? And I think you hit the nail on the head, Nicole. It's this litany of rules and requirements that go hand in hand with this new regulation. And so the problem that you're going to run into is, there's very specific timelines and requirements that really can muck up a efficient and quick hit the ground running strategy. So as soon as these rules drop, we're still waiting, unclear on the ETA there, but as soon as they drop, it's really important to know the nuances, because it can be very easy to stumble into, a violation, and you don't want DOL on your case.
Right, and we saw some of that kind of start to come to fruition under the Obama EO, right? Short turnaround times, employees that, didn't get back to the contractor on time, did they or did they not meet the timeliness requirements of returning their signed offer letter? How do I find these people, if the prior contractor didn't give us a list? So we anticipate many of these same challenges. But right now, it's not applicable. And we have seen contracting officers throw it out there during contract transition periods when our clients have unfortunately not been awarded a contract, and the contracting officers have come to our clients and said, well, you have to provide all of this information to us because we're going to give it to the incumbent so that they can hire your workforce. And we kind of say, wait a second, like we might have an obligation under the continuity of services provision to help transition a contract peacefully and give you certain information, but we don't, some of these requirements don't attach yet. And likewise, we've had clients that pick up a contract and they have a workforce that they want to bring in, or they don't want to hire people on the contracts that were there before. And there have been discussions about whether they have an obligation to do so. And the answer is they don't. The final rules haven't been issued yet. There's no FAR clauses that apply in those contracts. So it does not apply yet until those final rules are in place. And I think it's 90 days following that. I could be, don't hold me to that, but it's a certain period of time after, it's like 60 or 90 days after those final regulations hit that they will then be implemented. And you'll start to see that FAR clause, again, work its way into contracts following that. Sarah, what about, since we're on SCA, let's move to Davis-Bacon Act. There's been a lot going on in Davis-Bacon world. Can you update us on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz around the most recent regs that were issued because, first of all, it has been a lifetime since these regs were substantively changed. And so it's sort of unheard of in, current pop culture that DUBA has, updated their regs. So that's exciting in and of itself. And I feel like at this point, it's almost been 2 years since they first issued the initial, and then DOL issued initial regs sometime last year. And we are now waiting, again, same idea, waiting pattern for those final regs to come out. There are a lot of changes that are attendant to the DBA regs. And so for those of you who might be unfamiliar, under the Davis-Bacon Act, there are certain requirements to pay employees in the construction world a prevailing wage and prevailing fringe, and the DBA and those wage determinations really determine what those requirements are in the construction contract context. There are some very big changes that could be coming out of the new final regs. One of the biggest changes relates to the way that they're going to be calculating prevailing wages. Another consideration is that they are looking at this idea of applying the prevailing wage regardless of whether that wage determination has been incorporated into a contract. Currently, the way it currently stands, you are not subject to a wage determination unless it's been incorporated into your contract, the idea being that the DBA is a creature of contract, so it can only apply explicitly if that wage determination has been incorporated. This change that's been proposed, at very least, could really shake things up and make a lot more emphasis on, knowing what those wage determinations are, even if it's not in your contract. There are also very important requirements about certifying payroll and FCA obligations that pop up. So it's kind of a quagmire for those if you're not familiar with the construction world. If you are familiar with the construction world and you might not be familiar with the federal contracting space of that world, certainly worth an extra look to make sure you're getting everything right.
And the wage determination issue is one that I think we are very closely watching, because often during investigations, the Department of Labor will tell our clients that they are responsible for updating the wage determinations and making sure they're paying what's been issued, the latest and greatest, basically. And we always say, no, not so fast. It is what's in the contract, and it's not our responsibility to track this stuff. So it really shifts the burden onto contractors, and given like all the price adjustment issues that can occur, I'm hoping that, that's one of the things that goes, because it would certainly make it more difficult and put a lot of burden on contractors. Especially, and there are a lot of changes to the way they want to do with project labor agreements. You also see Davis-Bacon making its way into other areas through the IRS, which is really interesting. So if you are non-compliant with the Davis-Bacon Act, they can apply tax penalties to you. They're proposing, we haven't, again, gotten final rules on this, but that is one of those things lurking out there. And then if you are not even a federal contractor, but you are doing work on certain types of energy efficient projects, you can get these tax credits, or they're proposing that you can get tax credits if you decide to comply with the Davis-Bacon Act. And the IRS, I suppose, is going to get into the business of auditing substantively Davis-Bacon compliance, which which is very weird, but we'll see how
It's all part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And so there are certain, as Nicole mentioned, tax incentives companies understandably are going to want to take advantage of, but read the fine print, because there is a requirement in those that you comply with those DBA regs.
Right.
And as Nicole mentioned, IRS, which has historically not been involved in these questions, is going to be taking a closer look, and DOL has said they will back off, but jury's out as to how that really rolls out.
And the last one we really wanted to talk about, at least for today, is this Federal Trade Commission initiative to ban non-competes across the board as anti-competitive. The most common question I think I get on this is, what should I do about my non-competes now that I know they're coming after me? And what would you tell a client if they call you?
So the truth of the matter is, even if this is successful and FTC issues their final regs, this is going to be held up in the courts for the foreseeable future. There is no chance that within the next, I'd say even year, that we're looking at a ban on non-competes. So what I tell clients is, as of now, there's no change. Everything remains the same. But I also like to caveat that states are much more quickly issuing statutes and regulations that do tailor non-competes. So over the last, 5 years, we've seen a handful of states that have gone the route of, California was maybe the first to hit it off, really limiting the extent to which you can bind employees to non-compete agreements. Non-solicitation's a little bit less. The difference is that a non-solicitation generally is going to limit your employees from going after your customers, whereas a non-competition is going to be more targeted at keeping employees from providing the same or similar services to a competitor for those same customers, or in a certain geographic scope. And so what is important is that you make sure that your current non-competes are not overly broad. In some states, that could really end you up in a pickle. There are some penalties that can apply if you're trying to enforce an unenforceable non-compete. Often there are restrictions like you can't have it against minimum wage employees or employees earning under a certain salary. Recently, a lot of states have been increasing what that rate is. So in DC, I think it's like 120 or something. So it is not just those low wage workers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the practical implications are you should always be looking to tighten up your non-compete, non-solicitation provisions. You should be thinking about how to narrowly tailor them to the work that you're doing. You should be thinking about what people in your workforce you really need to apply these things to, and what you might just want a non-solicitation of employees or non-solicitation of clients apply to. So it's never a bad time to think about dusting things off and making sure that you're comfortable with what you have. But again, it's going to be quite some time. And I would venture to say likely maybe more than a year, but never say never. Maybe they'll move faster on this one, but we shall see. And with that, I think that concludes what we're going to talk to you today about. But I do also want to let you know that we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want us to talk about. So if there's something on your mind that's a burning question that you have, something you've always wanted to know, something you've never seen us do a webinar on, and you'd really like to get the quick, what do I do with this particular issue? Please let us know. Send us an email. This is for you all, so we want to make it useful for you.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.